Welcome back to Eventy at the Picnic Yard, where we discuss everything intimate event hosting, decor, styling, dining, and the entire shebang. Let's get sipping. In our last episode of Eventy at the Picnic Yard, we discussed different elements or principles that create visual interest in your setup and styling. But for this episode, we're going to be discussing the elements and principles that create balance, visual balance. So we're going to be talking about balance itself. We're going to be talking about unity and harmony. We're going to be talking about dimension and scale. With balance itself, balance is a kind of visual harmony, how to achieve visual harmony in such a way that your table looks intentional when it comes to size. So, for example, when you're setting a table, you're always looking at making what is happening, your left hand side and your right hand side, look equal. Not that everything looks flat, but when you step back from your setup and you look at it, what is happening at the left should be happening at the right. So this is in such a way, what is happening on the left should be happening on the right, in such a way that there is a balance in what you see. So one side does not look over decorated and then the other side looks under decorated, or there is something else, a different aesthetic is playing on this side of the table and another aesthetic is playing out on the other side of the table, except that is an intentional theme you're trying to achieve. That's a different ball game altogether. However, if you want to create something that is visually harmonious, you have to ensure that what is happening on the right hand is what is happening on the left hand. Now, balance doesn't mean it has to be identical. Everything must not be like hook, line, and sinker the same, but it has to be like a resemblance that is intentional. What is happening on one side of the table and what is happening on the other side of the table. Even when you're decorating a hall or an entire room, you're not going to make a particular side of the hall or room look drab and while the other side is looking over decorated. There, except maybe when you're trying to create like a special area, and the reason why you're doing that distinction is because maybe it's for VIP or for like a certain class of guests and all of that. But when you're trying to put a space together and you want it to look intentional and sophisticated, you have to ensure that you create what we call visual balance in your setup. So next we're going to be talking about dimension, height and dimension. Now, when we talk about texture, when we discussed texture and contrast the other time, we somehow made reference to dimension. So what dimension does for you in your setup is it does not, it creates texture. Dimension creates texture, visual texture, in such a way that everything does not look flat and blend into each other, in such a way that it just looks like you just drop things on the table without tension. So when you're setting a table or you're creating a setup or styling and it, you have to ensure that the elements are arranged in such a way that there is a continuous rise and fall that creates a level of visual interest that your eye is able to follow a certain kind of pattern in your setup. So when it comes to this, even when you look at floral arrangement, you see that there are certain geometric shapes that are considered when it comes to floral arrangement. Some of them are shaped in triangles, some of them are shaped in maybe inverted triangles, some of them are like dome shaped and all of that. So if all the flowers were put in a way that everything was flat and on the same line, that wouldn't look so visually interesting. So being able to create a rise and fall, and like you look at your setup when you also when it comes to like setting flowers on a table, floral arrangement, you see that more often than not the tallest vase and like the one which is like the focal point is put in the middle, so that it creates, it draws attention to itself, everybody gets to see it, and then progressively others can either get shorter or alternate between the taller and the shorter ones. So that is how to create visual balance with height and dimension. So next we have just like music has rhythm, that is how design also has rhythm. So rhythm and repetition is created when certain elements, maybe shapes, colors, are used repeatedly in your setup. So you get to see, like, say for example, the flowers that you use, you see that there's a repetition of a certain kind of flower that says, okay, this is a spring themed event or a spring floral arrangement. You know that there are certain flowers that are repeated. There are different kinds of pieces or decor pieces that are used that tells you that, oh, maybe this is an antique or a vintage themed setup, or this is like a modern or minimalist setup. So you get to see that rhythm and repetition are what you use to create pattern, the pattern that we discussed in the last episode. So you use rhythm and repetition to create pattern, and that pattern is now what tells the story, the visual story of the theme of your event. So you get rhythm and repetition by repeating maybe shapes, you repeat colors, you repeat maybe pieces and elements that tell a particular story, or that are representative of something you're trying to show or display in your event styling. So when your design, there's repetition and rhythm in your design, it quietly guides your eyes across the table and makes everything put together, makes it feel connected in a very, very intentional way. And one other thing again that is very, very interesting about rhythm in styling is that it creates a sense of comfort, whether or not the guests they know it or they recognize it. When you see this pattern of that is repeated over and over again, it kind of creates a level of comfort for your guests. So whether or not they recognize it, just remember that repeating patterns make create familiarity and then comfort. So the last principle or elements we're going to be highlighting is unity and harmony locked in together. So unity and harmony is this concept talks about how everything comes together, no matter how different they are, no matter how contrasting they are in colors, in texture, in height, how much a pattern is repeated, how things that are different are put together. At the end of the day, when you take a holistic view of everything in your styling, plus from the event team to the guests that you're hosting, even the menu, the kind of music that you're going to play, when you look at all the details put together, there should be a togetherness and like a oneness that is achieved, that feels intentional and looks curated. That is what unity and harmony is. So by the time you have put all the elements of your decor together and then you're not seeing harmony, you will now know that okay, there is something that is being too much, that is overshadowing other things that doesn't actually belong, or there is something that needs to be highlighted more so that it kind of creates a balance between other elements. Or maybe by the time you look at your setup and you look at everything together, you know the things that you have to reduce, you know the things that you have to increase, you know the things you have to highlight. There are some things you have to push back into the background, there are some things you will bring to the fore, so that there is a kind of harmony or a flow that is seamless between all the elements on your table or all the parts of your styling. So now that we have discussed this, you now know when you look at a table or the next time you go to an event, I want you to look out for these elements and identify the things that unifies it. You have to identify how dimension is played with, height and dimension is played with your to make your table or your styling to be more interesting, and then how things are combined to create visual balance, or how the styling is done to create visual balance. And then when you're also doing your own styling and setting up, remember to apply this principle so that you can style like a pro. But if you want to learn more and master the art of hosting like a pro, we're planning a masterclass for September, which is called the art of hosting, where you're going to learn the art of tablescape and the art of grace table setup and styling. Now that you have learned the elements and principles that creates visual balance in your styling and event design, in the next episode of Events here at the Picnic Yard, we're going to be looking at things from the eyes of a designer. As a designer, what are the things you do that helps you guide the guests to see, notice, and experience your styling? So that's what we're going to be looking at. And we're going to be looking at emphasis, negative space, movement, and layering. So mind you, all of these elements are not like standalone elements. They work together hand in hand to create what is a cohesive and beautifully styled event. So see you on our next episode. Grab a cup of tea. Stay subscribed for our next episode of Event Tea at the Picnic Yard, where we're going to be spilling all the interesting event styling and design and hosting teas. Until then, love ya.